them in their room, it's like a vacation for them. So if that tap on the tush happens, they say, hey, mom means business now.
Americans and American workers build better products than anybody else. So as long as we're competing on a fair playing field instead of an unfair playing field, we'll do just fine.
One person, one vote.
Evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks for joining us this Thursday evening, July 5th. Hope you guys had a good 4th. Now, as the day after Independence Day and the campaigns are in full gear, it is not a busy news cycle, but you get some real interesting clues today as to where the campaigns are going to double down between now and November. And we're going to sit down for a strategy session this evening with whose messaging is working better and who needs to maybe have a new refocus here in the dog days of summer. And let's bring in, to start off, Andrew Whitman, our senior political reporter here, who's going to really break down for us what each guy's doing, and they're already getting heat here from some of their so-called closest friends.
That they are, Rich, and as we broadcast tonight, we're just 124 days away from the election. The two candidates vying for a seat in the Oval Office, a little more than 2.5 points apart, with President Obama in the lead. The two campaigns kicking into a different gear here, each with their own message. As the president began his 2-day bus tour across northern Ohio and western Pennsylvania today, his emphasis was on manufacturing. During a stop in the manufacturing-rich Maumee, Ohio, he took the opportunity to highlight his administration's latest actions against China's trade policy, a policy that he calls unfair.
Just this morning, my administration took a new action to hold China accountable for unfair trade practices that harm American automakers. And let me tell you something, Americans aren't afraid to compete. We believe in competition.
Yes, we do.
I believe in trade. And I know this, Americans and American workers build better products than anybody else. So as long as we're competing on a fair playing field instead of an unfair playing field, we'll do just fine.
That message from the president also being mimicked in a new ad from the Obama campaign.
Outsourcing versus insourcing.
That ad paints Mitt Romney and Bain Capital as outsourcers. Meanwhile, Romney's got a bit of a message of his own, but a bit of a message problem because it's a little muddled. In the foggy aftermath of the Supreme Court ruling on Obamacare, Romney's senior advisor, Eric Fernstrom of Etch-a-Sketch fame, you'll recall, contradicted the GOP line and agreed with the White House, saying that the individual mandate is not a tax.
The governor believes that what we put in place in Massachusetts was a penalty, and he disagrees with the court's ruling that the mandate was a tax.
And then only days later, Mitt Romney said that the individual mandate is, in fact, a tax.
Well, the Supreme Court has the final word, and their final word is that Obamacare is a tax. So it's a tax.
Now, that got under the skin of the editorial page at the Wall Street Journal. They issued a scathing editorial jumping on Romney for taking the bait properly. Quote, this latest mistake is of a piece with the campaign's insular staff and strategy that are slowly squandering an historic opportunity. The Romney campaign thinks it can play it safe and coast to the White House by saying the economy stinks and it's Mr. Obama's fault. We're on its email list, and the main daily message from the campaign is that Obama isn't working. Thanks, guys, but Americans already know that. What they want to hear from the challenger is some understanding of why the president's policies aren't working and how Mr. Romney's policies will do better. Meanwhile, the editorial continues. The Obama campaign is assailing Mr. Romney as an out-of-touch rich man, and the rich man obliged by vacationing this week at his lakeside home with a jet ski cameo. Now, that editorial from a Rupert Murdoch-owned paper comes only days after Murdoch himself took to Twitter to blast the Romney campaign, saying, quote, met Romney last week. Tough Obama Chicago pros will be hard to beat unless he drops old friends from team and hires some real pros. Doubtful. Rich?
Ouch. All right, let's bring in our panel on this. Tom Doherty, political strategist and former advisor, Republican Governor George Pataki, and Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. And we already met Andrew. Hey, Tom, you've worked on campaigns here, a lot of them successful. You've also had some challenging ones. When the outside, and not Democrats here, but fellow Republicans, and it's not just Murdoch and the Wall Street Journal saying, hey, these guys aren't ready for prime time, and you got Romney, who doesn't seem to either be able to stay on message or come up with a coherent one. Is that usually the time where people start looking around the room and saying maybe we need a change, or do they just close ranks here and say they don't know what we know?
Well, there's certainly not going to be any change. I think that...
Why not, though?
Well, what change would you think? That we're going to have a new new Republican nominee.
No, but I mean, in terms of the handlers, Fernstrom hasn't exactly acquitted himself too well here the last few weeks.
Listen, I think that a lot of people a year ago, or even as much as 6 months ago, were talking about that Romney's in a lot of trouble. He's not going to be the nominee. He put those people to the side. Andrew said a lot of different things in his report, and there's a number of things to respond to. First of all, I think that the report should have said that Obama is off to Ohio to talk about manufacturing, and it's the first time in 3 years that manufacturing is now down in this country. That should have been a little addendum to the report. I think that
take notes,
Andrew. And then on the 4th of July, the Republican nominee spent a nice weekend with his family at his summer home. Shocking.
Wait, Tom, you're jumping to him. I got to tell you, this is the Wall Street Journal here. Hardly some liberal rag here.
Listen, it doesn't matter. I mean, listen, the bottom line is that we are 124 days from an election, from a man who 3.5 years ago was anointed the king of the world, and in all estimates is in a dead heat with the terrible, worst person ever, Mitt Romney. The bottom line is this in this election. If Mitt Romney, and remember this, let me give you another fact, is that in 1980, Ronald Reagan was in a dead heat 10 days out from a presidential election.
Mitt Romney to Ronald Reagan?
Wait a second. No, I'll tell you what the factual side of it is. 10 days out was in a dead heat with Jimmy Carter. We know how that election turned out. The bottom line is this, is that Barack Obama cannot get anywhere near 50% in this election right now. And I am telling you this, if during the next 124 days, if Romney does two things, has any semblance of connection with voters across this country where they go, you know what, he's a pretty decent guy, and couples that with a series of good debates, because I think that's what it's going to come down to, this has the potential of being a blowout election for Mitt Romney.
Okay, wait. He's been running for 5 years and he hasn't connected with the American people.
But here's my problem. You just made the point that this is, as the Wall Street Journal said, a golden opportunity for the grand old party.
Right.
And all people have gotten to know out there, like you said, no connection to the candidate, because what have they learned? That the guy's got a car elevator in a house out there in California, and he's jet skiing in one of his many homes, and he pays 14%, and his guy can't agree if they got an etiquette campaign or it's not a tax, and they'll agree with the White House on this. My point is, they seem to be doing their best to screw this thing up. So why wouldn't they look around and say, sorry, moving day boys? That's our West Wing fame, remember?
Yep.
And we're going to bring in another group of folks here.
Because I believe that there's nothing to be said that couldn't happen, okay? But I think that we forget that just 3 months previous, he was going through a very bruising battle in a Republican primary battle. I think that going forward, he needs to learn a couple of lessons. You can't have your communications guy saying it's not a tax, and 48 hours later you're saying it is a tax. The bottom line is the Supreme Court of the United States just said it's a tax, and what they should be focusing on is that we were sold a wrong bag of goods. The Obama, Reid, Pelosi group.
Your gut says Fernstrom's going to last through the election?
Who?
Fernstrom, the guy, his chief advisor here.
My gut says is that to some level, I think that loyalty matters a little bit, but certainly I think now this is 2 little strikes against a guy that turned out to be, a little bit, they're big strikes. And I'm never opposed to bringing in really smart people into political campaigns, and as Andrew will tell you, there's certainly enough money out there to go hire some new people.
Exactly. We're going to be talking about that. Dom, you've seen how this thing plays out, whether they quietly change the pecking order, who calls the shots here, but it's not just the 2 that Andrew mentioned. You got Bill Kristol, you got a ton of Republican folks saying, what are you doing? You got blood in the water here when it comes to the president. You got opportunities that we never thought we'd have a few years ago. And we're talking about this, and this is the imaging you're doing. What are you folks thinking? You think there's a shakeup or no?
No. I think that, that right now what we're talking about is a glass half empty scenario, as opposed to looking at it as half full. These are the same people, as Tom mentioned, that, we were told that Mitt Romney was the worst candidate ever, and they won the Republican primary. Are you in shock right now?
I am.
What I'm saying?
Yes, I am.
And they won the Republican primary. So you got to give these guys some credit.
For the love of money, you know, for all the focus on voters, electoral votes, positions, voting blocks, there's another campaign that can be just as important when it comes to figuring out who's going to get to sit in that Oval Office. It's called money, and the money race here is what we're going to focus on in this segment. Now, President Obama, he shattered fundraising records in 2008. The hidden headline of 2012, though, is that this time the president will likely not only be outraised, but beat down when it comes to the distinction between he and Romney when it comes to the green. Andrew, just how bad do the president's numbers look? And I remember, you and me a year ago, we were talking about this. It was a foregone conclusion he's going to raise more than his Republican opponent. Even Romney said as much. Now, he's definitely going to be on the short end. The question is how much.
And it might not even his campaign might not outraise Mitt Romney's campaign. Let's be clear about the money that we're talking about here. First, there are the actual campaigns, and where we got word today that Romney outraised Obama last month for the second consecutive month. But the real money in this race comes from the super PACs, where the wealthy can give unlimited amounts and have been. Each side has their own super PAC network, and when you check the numbers, the gap becomes crystal clear, and it's enormous. Let's start with the Obama side and Super PAC Priorities USA Action. Their goal is to raise $100 million for the president's re-election, but so far, Priorities has raised just $10.7 million. Why? Because they're just not getting that many seven-figure contributions, million-dollar contributions. So far, Priorities has had just a handful of big-dollar donors, among them the union that represents air traffic controllers, DreamWorks co-founder and Hollywood player Jeffrey Katzenberg, and they got $1 million from comedian Bill Maher. On the other side of the ledger is the network of super PACs backing Mitt Romney. The biggest of those is Restore America's Future PAC. It has also set its fundraising goal at $100 million, but thanks to mainly a big edge in those million-dollar donors, Restore has already raised more than $61 million. And that's not even counting the big-dollar donations Romney can bank on from other places like Crossroads GPS. That's the super PAC founded by former Bush strategist Karl Rove. Rove says Crossroads will raise and spend $300 million this cycle. Then there are the Koch brothers, Charles and David, known for backing conservative interests like the Tea Party and its affiliated groups. They've pledged $400 million. And casino mogul Sheldon Adelson, who single-handedly bankrolled Newt Gingrich during the primaries, he's committed to giving $100 million. That's one man, Sheldon Adelson, prepared to give as much to elect Mitt Romney as the pro-Obama super PAC has planned. To say there is a money gap, Rich, would be a gross understatement.
Well, Tom's doing a little fun bunch over here. He's happy with the numbers. But Andrew, explain this to me. Why do those that have the wherewithal to write seven-figure checks, why do they write it for a Republican candidate, but they won't do it for a president that was beloved even 3.5 years ago? This isn't so much about politics, is it?
Well, the reasons that benefit the Republican candidates and the Republican donors are mainly economic, that economic policies would be set by a Republican president that are beneficial to the people writing the checks. They'll get a return on their investment. There's an ideological objection from a lot of Democrats, a lot of big money Democratic donors. They hate Citizens United. They hate the idea of these unlimited ability to write funds, and so they don't want to participate in it, much in the same way that Obama basically poo-pooed super PACs for the first 3 years of his administration, and now he's, encouraging people to give as much as they can.
Dominic, what does this mean here? The person at home says, all right, I see a lot of zeros flying across the screen. What is the significance of being outraised 5, 6, 7 to 1 when it comes to super PAC dollars?
What it means, plain and simple. I can't honestly say what it means on television, but what it means in terms of the political reality is that the
I'd like to hear what it means. I'd like to hear what this means.
Okay,
I'm sure that the color of our president's coming into this conversation.
No, I'm not going to discuss.
I'm sure that it is. Go ahead.
I'm not going to bring up the race of the president of the United States.
Why? The fact is that last time around, he decided, I'm not going to do campaign finance when he said he would. And then decided to raise more money than anybody ever known. Did his color have anything to do with it then?
Richard, the fix is in. The fix. You know what it means. What does it mean? You know what it means. Obama defied every expectation that was in front of him, and now the system is making sure that he can't do it again. That's what it means.
This is crackpot.
That's what it means. No, it's not.
Dominic,
no, it's not.
I have such respect for you. What is going on here?
Okay, could it be?
So 4 years ago,
most of my predictions turn out accurate. Could it be that I know what I'm talking about on this one?
4 years ago, the fix wasn't in? That we just decided we're going to give him all the money in the world. And now, when George
first of all, wait.
Where were you when George Soros was writing $1 million checks?
Can I just say this, Richard?
The wheels are coming off.
4 years ago, it was small, regular people that donated all the money to Obama, and that's why he was able to break all the records in terms of raising money. Now you have those that are against his agenda and want to do everything in their power
Here's
to
my
stop
only
him.
distinction I'd say with you. I think they have now the method that they don't have to give $3,500 or whatever. Now they can give whatever they want to give with Citizens United, and which you saw with SwiftBoat. I don't think it's necessarily. Sure, the bigger bankroll you have, the more influence, but at the same thing, it's the more effective the messaging. I have one quick question.
Let the record
These guys
reflect,
are supposed to.
I didn't bring up race.
Okay,
now go ahead.
that's duly noted on the record.
He was thinking
That'll
it,
come up
though.
next time.
He was thinking it,
So,
though.
but here's my point. They're not supposed to talk to the campaigns.
Yeah, they don't.
Please tell me
They
the
don't.
real.
They don't.
So
come
wait,
on,
let me tell you.
Tom.
Here's
No,
my
Tom.
specific question.
Richard, let me
I
tell
got
you
a
this.
specific question
Yeah,
you
go
can
ahead.
answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, and I'm not doing Romney because this could be for Obama
It
too.
is.
They come up with some issue ad that's going to attack the president on X, and they're going to do it in the swing states.
Right.
Now, the campaign says, well, wait a second, I want to know when I'm doing my ad buys here, and I want to know I'm messaging that maybe I want to buy in the adjacency.
Yeah.
Maybe I want to buy in the same thing. Maybe I want my message to be similar to theirs, or I want it to be different so it's not duplicative. There has to be some coordination.
There isn't, and I'll tell you why. It is a very, having had some type of conversations and the idea of doing a super PAC for this and working with the campaign, you know, the legalities of it. None of these individuals want to go to jail. This is a very, very serious situation. It's a very simple thing that you do. You take a look at the Romney website. What is he talking about this month on his website? Okay, we should be talking about this with the super PAC. There is no, hey, Bob, what are you doing this week? That is illegal. People go to jail for that, and I don't care who you are.
So
a political person like at my level, you are not going to jail for anybody.
But you want to spend your money most efficiently.
Of course.
And when you do that, you want to be able to place those ads where you're going to have the most impact.
Right.
If in these swing states, it's going to be it's going to be tough to find commercial time.
Yeah.
You would think it would make things a lot easier if they coordinated.
You can't, though. Richard, as much as the skepticism is there, nobody is going to jail, and you'd have to be a complete
Last
idiot to
question.
do it. Yeah.
If the Romney campaign says, wait a minute here, you guys are going overboard. Let's say one of them says, he's a socialist, he's not, he's a Muslim, and they're like, you're hurting me more than helping me. Can they give basically a cease and desist through intermediaries, like cut the what?
No. Basically, they already have. Is basically you saw recently where a super PAC group said that they wanted to discuss the Reverend Wright situation. The media then went to Mitt Romney and said, how would you feel? And he said, absolutely not. So, I mean, that was just very clearly done. I mean, without coordination.
I have a bridge. You want to buy a bridge?
Tom's right about what he says, but I don't think there's anybody from the campaigns who are like open-jawed when they see an ad coming from one of these super PACs.
Of course they're coordinated. Anybody that believes different, I don't know.
I do.